I have a friend, his name is Reed Schroer. Shout out to him today. We worked together in my first call at University Lutheran Church in East Lansing, Michigan. Go Spartans. Our senior pastor there was the Venerable George Madsen, a man so brilliant that he wrote a PhD on the two Greek expressions for the word now in John's Gospel. And he wrote it in German. George has a booming voice and a beard of Old Testament dimensions, an old school Danish pastor. And Reed, my friend who worked with us, is an ex-hippie, a reader of cosmic contemplative books and a quoter of Thomas Merton. We made quite a crew. I was fresh out of seminary, still learning the ropes in ministry. Many years later, Reed confided in me that the people of the church called us three pastors the Old Testament prophet, the hippie, and the Xerox salesman. You can imagine which one I was of the three. But if you ever met my friend Reed, you would not quite know what to make of him. He was educated in rural Detroit. He studied to be a pastor. He worked as a licensed social worker before going back into the ministry again and serving churches until he retired. He's once divorced, and before he retired, he moved to northern Michigan, where he still lives with his wife, Roz, a genetic researcher whom he met when he was in Ireland on a spiritual vision quest. He's quite a guy. Reed has forgotten more things than I'll ever know. He is a brilliant man, and he's a wild man. Once a year, he drives from northern Michigan to go across the country to ride dirt bikes with an old friend of his. Sometimes when he does, he stops at my house and stays for one night along the way. And that's what he did back in September of 2020. And when my friend Reed got to Oregon, he rode 550 miles of dirt bike trails, camping every night in the fall weather. And then, one day, while he was riding full on, the front tire of his dirt bike got caught in a rut, and he biffed it pretty hard. He really went down. He ended up in the hospital with a bruised chest, a bruised lung, a bruised kidney, 5 broken ribs, and a compression fracture of his L4 vertebrae. And this guy's a retired pastor. Reed and I had a good video chat just this week. That's why I've been thinking about it. Suffice to say, if you were to meet my friend Reed, you would not know quite what to make of him. And the same could be said about our gospel reading today, the story of Jesus and Pilate. It seems that in John's gospel, Pilate does not know quite what to make of Jesus. He finds Jesus curious. "Are you a king?" he asks. "What have you done? Why have you been handed over to me?" He's looking at Jesus from his own perspective, and he can't make out just what this guy, Jesus, is all about. See, Pilate was governor of Judea for approximately 10 years, and he controlled the military force there, mostly just to keep the peace. He also had broad enough authority that he could name the Jewish high priest each year. Both the Gospels and other historical sources mention tensions under the rule of Pilate that continued to offend the sensibilities of his Jewish constituency. And now along comes Jesus, this rabbi who washes feet, the one who calls God Abba, Father. He gives sight to the blind. He makes the lame able to walk. He's even been purported to have raised a dead man named Lazarus. I mean, really, who is this guy who goes around calling himself the bread of life? So Pilate plies Jesus with questions, and Jesus gives it right back to Pilate in spades. In the story, Jesus ends up questioning Pilate. "Do you ask this on your own, or did someone tell you about me? My kingdom is not from this world." And if we were honest with ourselves for just 1 minute, we would have to admit that we don't quite know what to make of Jesus either. Because Jesus did not fit into Pilate's worldview, and he certainly does not fit into ours. Water into wine? Okay, Jesus, I guess. Feeding 5,000 people? Teaching Nicodemus at night? Talking to the Samaritan woman at the well? Like Pilate, we come to God, we come to Jesus with our questions. Where are you now, God? What are you calling us to do? What is really true? And how do you fit into all the things we see around us? Maybe Pilate is less to be thought of as the evil man who had Jesus crucified, and more as the man who represents all of us and the questions that we still have for God. Maybe we should downgrade our judgment of Pilate long enough to admit that he asks the same kind of question that we want to ask, the same thing that we want to know. What is truth? Because misinformation is everywhere, and your version of the truth might be different than my version of the truth. Pilate could only conceive of Jesus from his own point of view as governor of Judea. And we can only see Jesus as people who live in this time, knowing what we know now. I wish that for one day you could all see the world and the church through the pastor's eyes. If you could, then you would surely see the ache and the desire that people have to understand where Jesus figures into their lives and what they are experiencing today. In the past week, for example, I've had people ask me the following questions. Does your free store take venison donations? Can the church or anyone you know use a reasonably good couch? Can we talk more about Ukraine and the war? Will you pray for my friend? She's having surgery next week. Can I see you, Pastor Jeff? Because I'm worried about my marriage. And even though I read the Bible a lot, I still feel like I might be going crazy. We're getting married this fall, Pastor Jeff. Can you come and preside at the ceremony? The questions go on and on. People asked me this week, should our preschool have a full day option? My father died. Will you come and pray with me and my family? Can I get some gas so I can get to my doctor's appointment? Like Pilate, we don't know what to make of Jesus. And you know what? I would imagine that he doesn't know what to make of us either. For every question Pilate had for him, Jesus sent one back. And for everything we wonder about, I bet Jesus looks at us and wonders too. Who are these people? What do they stand for? What does it mean to them to follow me? Pilate was governor of Judea. That was his perspective on the world. He kept the peace for the empire. He didn't live in Jerusalem, but he was in Jerusalem at that time for the Passover, representing the Roman Empire, while the Jews were celebrating the overthrow of Pharaoh and the Egyptian Empire. For heaven's sake, that's what Passover is. Can we see then the tension in the situation between these two men as they talk? And can we see in turn the tension between our way of looking at the world and what Jesus sees? Because he comes at things from a vastly different place than you and I. That place from which Jesus comes is about true life, self-giving, relationships, and living under the reign of God. And I suggest that rather than judging Pilate for his misguided encounter with Jesus, we instead should look at ourselves and ask if we understand Jesus at all. Ask ourselves how many priorities we've pushed ahead of following him. Priorities like family and children, romance, technology, politics, money, status, careers. We don't need to judge Pilate. We are Pilate. Conjuring up one last question to help us escape from the fact that as we set out to question God, Jesus turns and questions us. What is truth, we say? In 2022, that's everyone's escape hatch. because we can all safely hold to our own version of the truth and insulate ourselves right there. We do it all the time. What we need to understand, actually what we need to hear proclaimed to us, is that Jesus is God's truth. Jesus is God's version of the truth. And what we see in him, feeding people, healing people, helping them thrive, washing feet, is the self-giving spirit of a God who would die and rise for a world that does not quite get who Jesus is. A world full of Pilates. A world full of people like you and me. But sometimes God's truth grasps us in spite of our inability to get what Jesus is really all about. And sometimes the truth calls forth our loyalty. Sometimes we fall into situations where our lives align with the life of Jesus. And when that happens, people, you better watch out. Because suddenly you'll feel yourself coming from a completely different place altogether. You'll sense a call to give yourself away into the lives of others. Competing loyalties will be stripped away. And when that happens, I may not be able to tell you how it was you arrived at that moment, but I can tell you what it looked like. It looked like love. The Spirit of God will have ushered you there. And I can tell you one thing for sure. The world will not know quite what to make of you. And it will not know quite what to make of a church that continues to pour itself out for others over and over again. Amen.